Students, staff, and honored guests, welcome to the 11th annual Ridgeland High School Veterans Day program. We're gathered today to pay tribute to those who have served in our nation's armed services. I ask that everyone remain quiet and respectful during the program today. Ridgeland High School heartily welcomes the many veterans and their families and other guests who have joined us today for the ceremony. At this time, please rise and remain standing for the presentation of the colors by the Junior ROTC Color Guard and the singing of the national anthem by the Ridgeland Chorus. Please remain standing until asked to be seated. Please be seated. World War I shook the world for 4 years, 1914 to 1918, claiming 20 million lives. An armistice was signed on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. After that war, the U.S. celebrated November 11th as Armistice Day. After World War II, the name of the Day of Remembrance was changed to Veterans Day to honor all those who served in war or peace. This is a day when we keep in mind the brave men and women of this nation who above all else believed and fought for a set of ideals. They chose to serve the cause that is greater than self, to give others the opportunity for a better life. Americans generally complain a lot and suffer little. American military suffer a lot and complain very little. To all our veterans, there's no tribute, no commemoration that can match the magnitude of your service and sacrifice. Our debt to our veterans can never be repaid, but our gratitude and respect must last forever. For many veterans, our nation was important enough to endure long separations from their families, miss the births of their children, freeze in sub-zero temperatures, bake in wild jungles, lose limbs, and far too often lose their lives. Please think about that today and tomorrow and thank a veteran for his or her service, which has kept our nation free. Tomorrow is kind of a special Veterans Day. It'll be 11-11-11. You young people need to talk to older veterans who you may know and learn of their experiences. My most vivid memories of my father are those times when we sat around and looked at the photos from World War II, and he told me of his time in service of his country. I've talked to other staff members like Coach Oliver, whose father rose to the rank of full colonel in the United States Army and served in Vietnam, and Coach Parrott, whose father was in World War II in Germany. They've related stories of their own father's service. Please converse with a veteran and thank any veteran that you meet. I know that we have many students here who would choose to serve their country in our military services, many of which have already taken positive steps to do so. I salute you and commend you for your willingness to serve. Maybe you return to Ridgeland for a Veterans Day ceremony in the future. I'd like to recognize some of the individuals we have in attendance today. First, I'd like to recognize any in attendance who invited a veteran to the program today. So if you invited a veteran to the program, whether or not they were able to attend, please stand. Nobody invited one? The families of servicemen face many challenges, long periods of separation, moving from one location to another, making new friends in a new school, housing problems, etc. If you have been a wife, husband, or a child of a serviceman, now or any time in the past, would you please stand? Thank you. We will now honor any in attendance who have been held as a prisoner of war by our enemy. I know we have one. Do we have any others? Please stand if you have been held as a prisoner of war by our enemy. Mr. Honeycutt, stand. Okay. I want to just remain standing, if you would, Mr. Honeycutt. I want to recognize one of the bravest of Walker County's veterans, Mr. Robert Honeycutt. Mr. Honeycutt was in a B-24 that was shot down by the Germans over Austria on May 29, 1944. He was captured and remained a prisoner of war till he was liberated on May 8, 1945. During this time, Mr. Honeycutt endured the famous German Death March, in which American airmen POWs were marched almost 800 miles in 86 days in the brutal winter of 1945. The men on this march suffered incredible hardships. Their story stands as an everlasting testimony of the American spirit. Mr. Honeycutt, some of you may know, is the author of a book about his experience called The 11th Man. He's also the man who began the Museum of All Wars in Chickamauga, Georgia. Please join me in a standing ovation to a true American hero, Mr. Robert Honeycutt. Thank you. Be seated. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Honeycutt. Shh. At this time, junior ROTC cadets Chase Gallion, Gary Tucker, Cortland Miller, Tyler Myers, and Ian Simpson, and band member Josh Perez will present a special ceremony honoring American prisoners of war and those missing in action.
Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the table in front of me. We ask that you remain seated and silent as we conduct the POW MIA ceremony. This ceremony is rich in military tradition and honors those men and women of our armed forces who, in defense of the freedoms of our country and that of the free world, are unaccounted for and are classified as prisoners of war or missing in action. As you entered the building this morning, you may have noticed the table and ask why it was in such a prominent place. The table before you is a place of honor. It is set for one. This table is our way of symbolizing the fact that members of our profession of arms are missing from our midst. They are commonly called POWs or MIAs, but we call them brothers. They are unable to be with us this morning, and so we remember them. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call to arms. Remember. The table is set for one, symbolizing the frailty of one prisoner alone against his oppressors. Remember. The single red rose displayed in a vase reminds us of the families and loved ones of our comrades in arms who keep the faith, awaiting their return. Remember. The red ribbon, tied so prominently on the vase, is reminiscent of the red ribbon worn upon the lapel and breast of thousands who bear witness to their unyielding determination to demand a proper accounting of our missing. Remember. The candle. The candle is lit, symbolizing the upward reach of their unconquerable spirit. They will not be contained. Remember. A slice of lemon is on the bread plate to remind us of their bitter fate. Remember. A sprinkling of salt is upon the bread plate, symbolic of the family's tears as they wait. Remember. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us this day. Remember. The Bible. The Bible symbolizes the faith of the POWs and MIAs as they were in their individual situations. Their strength and faith, and that of their great nation, was founded as one nation under God, was often their only hope. Remember. The chair. The chair is empty. They are not present with us this morning, and so we remember them for their fate and for their deeds. Remember. Remember, all of you who served with them and called them comrades, who depended on their might and aid and relied upon them, for surely they have not forsaken you. They have paid a great price. Remember. Remember until the day they come home. Remember. Peace and arms! Order, arms.
Thank you. Do we have any Georgia Bulldogs fans present today? Okay. All right. Uh-oh. Okay. See, we got some Tennessee fans too. All right. Shh. Our speaker for today has traveled all the way from Athens, Georgia to join us. He's Lieutenant Colonel Philip Byrd, who is the commander of Air Force ROTC, University of Georgia. Colonel Byrd is responsible to recruit, educate, and train and commission highly qualified students to fill the Air Force officer requirements. Colonel Byrd received his commission through the Air Force ROTC program at the University of Southern Mississippi. His assignments include missile crew duty, operations officer for a training squadron, which trains space surveillance warfighters, and commander of a recruiting squadron. He has held his present position at the University of Georgia since July of 2009. I'd also like to recognize Mrs. Byrd, who joined in today. Please stand. Let's give a warm Ridgeland welcome to our speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Byrd.
Go Dogs. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Simpson. Mr. Smith, thank you very much for having me. It is an honor for me to be here today to speak on the occasion of Veterans Day. You know, it's amazing to think that tomorrow is the 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th year, 11/11/11. I would challenge y'all to look at your watch tomorrow and capture the 11th second of the 11th minute of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th year. So if you're tracking with me, that's 11/11/11, 11/11/11. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. So I challenge y'all to look at your watch and make note of that time. But it is truly a great honor to be here to commemorate this year's Veterans Day. We've already had the opportunity to ask all the veterans to be recognized, and it's outstanding to have you in the audience and for me to speak to you today. You, the veterans in this auditorium, are my heroes, and one of the main reasons why I joined the service over 22 years ago. I grew up as a military dependent in the 1960s and 70s. My dad served in the Air Force in the Vietnam era, so while others of that period had disdain for service members, I had great respect for those of you who were willing to answer our nation's call. Growing up, my heroes didn't come from TV, movies, comic books, or sports. I looked up to the individuals, just like those veterans in this audience, for their character, their commitment, their professionalism, and service to this great nation. I recently had the opportunity to spend some time with a World War II veteran. I really think as a society and as a generation, we don't spend enough time with our elders, and especially veterans. This individual, Colonel Clyde E. Noble, was a veteran of World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam era also. He is definitely a hero, but I know he believes those who gave the ultimate sacrifice of their lives are the true heroes. Tomorrow we'll be honoring him in a ceremony in Athens. I know many of you in this room feel the same way, but to me, the sacrifices of this generation and those before have made in the name of freedom make each veteran a hero for all the generations that follow, the young generation in this room. Veterans Day is a national holiday during which we honor all those who served and are serving in the military. With the current conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq and around the world, I know you had a large selection of veterans you could have had come to speak to you today. Today, I would like to share with you a story born from the battles of Afghanistan. There are stories of many other heroes whose stories need to be told and retold through the ages. But instead of just talking about the war, I want to tie the history of Veterans Day to the veterans serving today. Many of you may not be aware of the history of Veterans Day. You did hear a little bit today. I'm going to add to that. The history of Veterans Day starts back in 1918 on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of that year when Germany signed the armistice that ended World War I. In 1919, President Woodrow Wilson and many states made the 11th of November a holiday known as Armistice Day, a day to commemorate the end of the war to end all wars. On the 11th of November 1953, citizens of Emporia, Kansas staged a Veterans Day observance instead of Armistice Day. Later that same year, a bill was introduced in Congress to change Armistice Day to Veterans Day in order to honor all those who served in all American wars. There are an estimated 25 million veterans alive in the United States. We have served in various wars throughout the last century and into this century. As a student of history, I want to take a moment to reflect on the First World War that brought about this day of remembrance. The war to end all wars was one of the bloodiest in history. During the terrible battle of Ypres Salient in 1915, Major McRae, a Canadian battlefield physician, found himself treating the wounded of various nationalities for 17 days straight. On one particular day, a young friend, a lieutenant and former student of the doctor's, was killed by a mortar shell. The lieutenant was buried later that day outside Major McRae's dressing station, where the doctor performed funeral ceremony in the absence of a chaplain. The next day, sitting on the back of an ambulance outside his aid station, Major McRae vented his anguish by composing a poem. In a nearby cemetery, Major McRae could see wild poppies that sprung up in the ditches in that part of Europe. Looking from his friend's grave to the wild poppies, Major McRae penned his now famous poem in 20 minutes. It's entitled, "In Flanders Field." In Flanders Field, the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up the quarrel with the foe, to you, from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders field. A very powerful poem full of imagery, but I want to focus on the last part. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you, from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep. The torch Major McRae was referring to, I believe, is the torch of freedom and liberty, a noble cause for many nations. From our nation's humble beginning, that torch has been passed down from the unfailing hands of generation to generation. Today, my generation has taken up the torch of freedom, and before it's over, I believe the young generation in this room, many will have to answer our nation's call and take on that torch. Many have had the opportunity to carry the torch of freedom, supporting Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. I want to tell you a war story from Operation Enduring Freedom. I want to tell you about Staff Sergeant Gabe Brown, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant Gabe Brown is now Captain Gabe Brown and is currently stationed in Florida. He continues to give back to his country, helping train and mentor future officers of my ROTC program. He has taken time from his busy schedule to be our distinguished guest speaker in class and at our leadership lab at the University of Georgia. The primary operation Captain Brown was engaged in is known as Operation Anaconda, which occurred 10 years ago, March 2012. This now famous battle is known as the Battle of Takur Ghar, or better known to many as the Battle of Roberts Ridge, named after one of the fallen. The operation took place along the eastern border of Afghanistan, near Pakistan. Like the giant snake it was named after, the plan was for the ground forces to surround our enemy position and squeeze them to death, while the Air Force provided close air support from above. From day one, things didn't go as planned. The enemy had many times the number, hiding in the rugged mountains that Central Intelligence Agency sources had estimated. It was only through the courageous actions of young men on the ground that the Air Force and our joint force brothers and sisters were able to adapt to the situation and defeat al-Qaeda and Taliban forces that took refuge in the terrain. The battle went on for about 10 days, but I want to share with you the story of what has become known as the Battle of Roberts Ridge. On the first day of the battle, 2nd of March 2002, ground forces were to be airlifted by the helicopter to landing zones in the mountains. Things went bad from the start. Most of the landing zones, the flatter areas of the mountains, were heavily defended by al-Qaeda. Because we were not able to insert forces as planned, ground commanders decided on the 4th of March to insert Navy SEALs on one of the highest mountains in the region named Takur Ghar. The idea was for the SEALs to have visibility to direct fire on the battlefield down below. As they approached the landing zone on Takur Ghar, the Navy SEAL helicopter came under heavy fire. The helicopter was badly damaged, but it was able to successfully crash land some distance away. But when a head count was taken, they realized there was someone missing, a Navy SEAL named Neil Roberts, who was on the landing zone surrounded by the al-Qaeda forces. An Army helicopter was immediately sent to rescue Roberts, but it also took heavy damage and crashed a short distance away. With a mindset of leave no one behind, a Ranger Quick Reaction Force was sent to the action to rescue Roberts. A message was sent from headquarters to the Rangers not to land at that specific landing zone on Takur Ghar, but the message never made it to the Ranger Quick Reaction Force. During this second rescue attempt, the Ranger Quick Reaction Force, one helicopter was diverted because it lost communication capability. The second helicopter was again ambushed and forced to crash land on the landing zone. While on the ground, the helicopter continued to take heavy machine gun fire. The crew and the Rangers scrambled from the helicopter and began returning fire. The Rangers suffered many casualties as they defended their position throughout the day. Staff Sergeant Gabe Brown was the Air Force combat controller embedded with the Rangers who would call in close air support, which would save all of their lives. His story is best summed up in the citation which accompanied his Silver Star, the third highest decoration awarded by the Air Force during wartime. The President of the United States of America, authorized by the Act of Congress of July 9, 1918, takes pleasure in presenting the Silver Star to Staff Sergeant Gabriel P. Brown, United States Air Force. In support of Operation Enduring Freedom during Operation Anaconda near Marzak, Paktia Province, Afghanistan, on March 4, 2002. Sergeant Brown was the primary ground forward air controller assigned to the Quick Reaction Task Force to recover 2 American servicemen evading capture in austere terrain occupied by masked al-Qaeda and Taliban forces. Shortly before landing, his MH-47E helicopter received accurate rocket-propelled grenade and small arms fire, severely disabling the aircraft and causing it to crash land. Sergeant Brown and the remainder of his assault force formed a hasty defense and immediately suffered 4 critical casualties. In spite of the battle's intensity, he held his position and directed Air Force fighter aircraft in 8 separate strafing runs against multiple reinforced enemy positions. In the direst of situations, he called in 3 guided bomb units and 2 Hellfire missiles within 75 meters of his own position, destroying a fortified bunker. The decisive action allowed his small force to secure the high terrain. Meanwhile, an enemy patrol flanked the team from the south, mortally wounding 1 pararescueman in a 20-minute barrage of fire. Sergeant Brown again directed close air support assets against these positions, eliminating the threat. His boldness of spirit, drive, and technical lethality saved the lives of 26 American servicemen. By his gallantry and devotion to duty, Staff Sergeant Brown reflected great credit upon himself in the United States Air Force. In the end, 8 servicemen died in their valiant efforts to destroy the enemy and rescue 1 fallen comrade. A great man once said, "There is no greater love than this, that a man laid down his life for his friend." It was reported that thousands of enemy forces were killed during the operation. I think this is a great example of how the services, Army, Navy, and Air Force, were able to work together as brothers and sisters in arms to turn defeat into victory. In the end, all personnel were recovered, and the enemy in that battle was destroyed. Today, our country is still at war. Our foes are those extremists who would give their lives to do those of you sitting in here in this audience and your families harm in the blink of an eye, just like they did to our fellow citizens on 11 September 2011. These extremists are my generation's and your generation's enemies of freedom. Today, many brave young men and women continue to fight in Iraq, Afghanistan, and around the world. You can trust that throughout our armed forces, we hold high the torch of freedom and liberty that other veterans have passed on to us. Today's generation of young men and women have taken up our quarrel with the enemy and hold the idea of freedom high for our nation and for the world to see. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, a day to honor those who are serving and have served in our armed forces. It is a day to recognize those of you in this room and around the country who have served and sacrificed for our country and for our freedoms. Veterans Day and Memorial Day are 2 times a year we set aside to recognize those who have served and those who have given the ultimate sacrifice. Every other day of the year, I hope Americans will think about service members, the heroes and the survivors, the ones who have picked up the torch of freedom from the unfailing hands of our forefathers to hold it high as a beacon for our nation and the world to see. Be confident that today's generation is keeping the faith with the great American service members, heroes, who have already given so much in the name of freedom. Know that my generation holds high the torch of freedom that has been passed on to us, that we may keep the faith with those who have given the ultimate sacrifice in order that they may sleep. Thank you. May God bless America, and may God bless our veterans. Thank you.
We now come to the most important part of our Veterans Recognition Ceremony, time to honor the veterans who have joined us for today's program. Before we honor our veterans separately, I want to ask the veterans to stand when I call out your years of service. First, I'd like to have all veterans stand who served in the military during World War II. Let's see. Mr. Honey. I know Mr. Honeycutt. Thank you. These men helped save us from domination by the Germans and the Japanese. We don't have that many World War II veterans around now. In fact, they're dying at a rate of 1,000 per day. Secondly, I'd like to recognize those who served in the time period 1946 to 1953, which would include veterans of the Korean War. Do we have any? Okay. Next. Third, would like to ask those to stand who served during the tense Cold War period, 1956 to 1965. Okay. Thank you very much. Wow. Okay. Fourth, next we'd like to honor those who served during the Vietnam War era, 1965 to 73. Even if you did not go to Vietnam, you served during that era. Many of these veterans were not given their due respect and honor by our citizens, but we honor them today. Please stand. Next, will veterans who served between the Cold War dates of 1973 to 1990 please stand? Everyone please remember that the draft ended in 1973, so all these who served after that date were volunteers. Okay. Next, we'll honor those who served during Operation Desert Storm or the Persian Gulf War in 1990 to 91. This is anyone in the military, whether or not you went to the Middle East. Then we'd want to honor those who served during the period 1991 to 2001. Thank you. Lastly, we'll honor those who have served during the War on Terror from 2001 to the present. Remember, many of these have deployed one or more times to Iraq or Afghanistan. Thank you. This time I recognize Mr. Chuck Donaldson, who will call the names of the veterans who are in attendance, and we ask that he come to the center of the gym floor to accept the flag from Mr. Smith.
It's my honor to call roll. When you hear your name, please come to the front. Please save your applause till I am finished with all names, so all names can be heard. Thank you. Our speaker, Philip Byrd, Air Force. Our staff, Robert Smith, our principal, Army. Reby Evans, Army. Fritz Schultz, Army and Navy. Jane Barrett, Air Force. Eric Crisp, Navy. Charles Perry, Air Force. Nanette Brass, Navy. Carl Gentry, Air Force. Paul Simpson, Air Force. Rohalen Aliman, Army. James M. Berry, Marines. Lawrence Berry, Army. Tony Campbell, Navy, father of Alex Campbell. William Chandler, Marines, grandfather Megan Phillips. Bob Clark, Air Force. Alan Crawford, Army Air Corps. George Cummings, Navy. Papa of Whitney Cummings. Wayne Espy, Marines, uncle of Blake Pendergrass. Robert Evans, Army, father of Reby Evans. Joe Fouts, Army. Buford Genter, Marines. James Hampson, Army, grandfather of Nicole Hennessy. James Harris, Marines. Jerry Hamons, Army and Navy. Tommy Haynes, Army. Otis Hickman, Army. Michael Hill, Marines. Pete Heisey, Army, grandfather of Hunter, Austin, and Tyler Heisey. Robert Honeycutt, Army, Air Corps. Charles Keller, Army, uncle of Caitlin Pace. Jeffreda Knight, Army. Roy Knox, Navy, grandfather of Kayla Pryor. Charles McNabb, Marines, grandfather of Hayden and Hannon Roman. Ray Miller, Navy. Michael Moore, Marines, uncle of C.J. Moore. Raymond Newsom, Air Force, grandfather of Nicole Hennessy. Peter O'Neill, Army. Sam Parrish, Navy, father of Richard Brown. Charles Pearson, Air Force, grandfather of Alicia and Kaylin Pearson. Timothy Prince, Army, uncle of Michaela Lowe. John Rhea, Navy and Merchant Marines. Jackie Roach, Army National Guard, grandfather of Garrison Roach. Bill Sandberg, Army. Casey Shelby, Air Force, cousin of Jordan and Blakely Epperson. Greg Sykes, Navy, father of Caitlin and Brittany Sykes. James Sims, Army, papa of Coley Lamb. Tom Skipper, Army, grandfather of Alex Campbell. Frederick Walker, Air Force, father of Shenandoah Walker. Terry Wigley, Army, father of Donovan Wigley. Hoyt William, Army, grandfather of Jake Cameron. John Wolfe, Navy. Jeff Woolridge, Army, father of Nikki Woolridge. Marshall McLeod, Army, daughter Hunter McLeod. David R. Miller, Marines, grandfather of Victoria Capehart. Lamar Jackson, Navy, son of Tyler Jackson. Or the son is Tyler Jackson. Sorry about that. All right. Yeah. Charles Jones, Air Force, husband of Dolores Jones, one of our substitutes. James Bradshaw, Army, uncle of Tyler Jackson. Earl Bradshaw, Air Force, grandson Tyler Jackson. Mike Basham, Navy, cousin of Zach Taylor. Bob Punch, Navy, son of Timothy Punch. Son Timothy Punch. Somebody wrote this down. James Harrison, Army, granddaughter Nicole Hennessy. Gary Peters, Army, grandson Nathan Russell. Please listen carefully to this next very special situation. Charles Crabtree, Army, grandson Zachary Armour, who lost an uncle, James David Tatum, died Desert Storm, 1991. Gold Star mother, Debbie Rowe. Ray Kingsley, Army, grandson Cordell Kingsley. Bill Curtis, Army, grandson Chase Curtis. Now, those are the names I have on paper. If you are here as a veteran and for some reason got through the paperwork, please come forward. Students, you've been very good, very respectful. Now, please show your appreciation for these heroes of the United States.
Thank you, thank you. Yes. Please be seated. I wanted to just like to add to what Mr. Donaldson said. I just wanted to commend the students for their respect and silence during the program today. I really appreciate it. I know all of your teachers and Mr. Smith and principals are very proud of you. The conclusion of our program today will be a second number by the outstanding Ridgeland Chorus. When this is concluded, all students should quietly proceed to their second period class or for the Honors Academy third period. All of our guests, please remain until the students have departed and then join us for a reception given in your honor in the cafeteria.